Amen. Okay, we're in 2 Samuel chapter 16, or beginning in 15, actually. And so this is David he's king of Judah and Israel, and right now they brought the ark to Jerusalem. They had that fight with the Ammonites, and then there was the sin in that David was involved with. And then this last week we talked about Amnon and Tamar, and it kind of a sordid story that happened there. And then Absalom's revenge on that, when he told the people, he went out and met with Amnon and a whole bunch of other people and had them all kill him. And so it kind of obviously brought Absalom and David apart. But then David reconciles with Absalom, and so in chapter 14. So we saw that last week. But here in chapter 15 and we actually went through verse 1 through 6, and this is where Absalom starts plotting. He's plotting a conspiracy against his dad and against the kingdom. And in verse 1 of chapter 15, now it came about after that Absalom provided for himself a chariot and horses and 50 men as runners before him. So it seems like this is kind of, look at me, I'm important. And then in verse 2 through 6, you see kind of the slick talker that he is. Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way to the gate, and it happened that when any man had a suit to come to the king for judgment, Absalom would call him and say, from what city are you? And he would say, your servant is from one of the tribes of Israel. Then Absalom would say to him, see, your claims are good and right, but no man listens to you on the part of the king. Moreover, Absalom would say, oh, that one would appoint me judge in the land. Then every man who has a suit or cause would come to me, and I would give him justice. And it happened that when a man came near to prostrate himself before him, he would put out his hand, take hold of him, and kiss him. So we're going to, in this next year, in this country, we're going to see a lot of this politicking. And he's wanting to look impressive, with a chariot and horses. He feigns this deep concern. And as we go through and look at Absalom, we're going to see really he is feigning this concern for people's rights. And so in verse 7, now it came about at the end of 40 years. Now right there, some ancient versions read 4 years. And it sure makes a lot more sense with the text to have 4 years there. 40 could be there, but it looks like 4 years of this has gone on. And so I would tend to think it's the 4. That Absalom said to the king, please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I was living in Geshur in Aram, saying, if the Lord shall indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will serve the Lord. And the king said to him, go in peace. So he rose and went to Hebron. Now, he says he made a vow, and David believes him. And as we go through and see the character of Absalom, we're going to maybe have some doubts if that was really true at all. But this is David's son. But Absalom sent spies. Now, that word there for spies is, it fits, but it's a little bit different than what we think of as a spy. It actually means to walk along and to be a talebearer. So it's more like he sent people out to slander. It's more that than to spy on. They are people that he sent out. But he sent them throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then you shall say, Absalom is king in Hebron. And so he's kind of preparing things for this conspiracy against David's kingdom. Then 200 men went with Absalom from Jerusalem, who were invited and went innocently, and they did not know anything. And Absalom sent for Ahithophel, the Gilonite, David's counselor from his city, Gilo, while he was offering the sacrifices. And the conspiracy was strong, for the people increased continually with Absalom. So this is working. The people are growing. He's got this deep concern he claims to have for the people's rights. He wants to be loyal to his vow. Oh yeah, that's a good thing. He sends out these spies. I think of talking points. That would be something we understand. We send someone out with talking points. He's got a crowd of 200, which is some people that can stir up a crowd, a mob. And then Ahithophel is David's counselor. So he's got Ahithophel on his side. So he's surrounding himself for this plan, this conspiracy. Verse 13. Then a messenger came to David saying, "The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom." So there we go, political again. The polls favor Absalom. Verse 14, and David said to all his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, "Arise and let us flee, for otherwise none of us shall escape from Absalom. Go in haste, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword." So David is saying, he sees the problem and says, we need to flee the city. We need to save ourselves and the city. And in Psalms chapter 41, this is a psalm that David wrote, and it seems to be dealing with Ahithophel's treachery, because Ahithophel was a counselor to David. And we're going to read in a bit how he was looked at. I think it's the next chapter, about how he was viewed. In Psalm 41, it says in verse 9, "Even my own familiar friend, in whom I trusted, who ate my bread, has lifted up his heel against me." And then in verse 12, "As for me," that's David, "you uphold me in my integrity and set me before your face forever." And then also in Psalm 55, Psalm 55 and verse 12 through 14. Let me get some. "For it is not an enemy who reproaches me, then I could bear it. Nor is it one who hates me, who has magnified himself against me. Then I could hide from him. But it was you, a man my equal, my companion, and my acquaintance. We took sweet counsel together." And so it seems like Ahithophel and David, that was his counsel, and he relied on them, and they'd become close. And then in verse 21 of that same chapter, and I'm not sure, this seems to be talking about these events that were taking place with Ahithophel and Absalom and David. And I'm not sure if this is talking about Absalom or Ahithophel. But he has, in verse 21, "The words of his mouth were smoother than butter." Well, that sounds like Absalom, going but war was in his heart. Well, that fits with Absalom. "His words were softer than oil, yet they were drawn swords." And it seems to fit with Absalom, although it's his son. And he has this closeness that even when he is being attacked and his son is trying to kill him, he still has a certain closeness with Absalom. And we'll see that as we go on. Then the king's servant said to the king, "Behold, your servants are ready to do whatever my lord the king chooses." Did I skip here? verse 14, and David said to his servants who were with him in Jerusalem, "Arise and let us flee, for otherwise none of us shall escape from Absalom. Go in haste, lest he overtake us quickly and bring down calamity on us and strike the city with the edge of the sword." So he could see he would have the advantage right now. Things were going well for Absalom. He was gaining popularity, and a quick attack would be successful. And David says, let's go. Let's save the town and ourselves. His servant said, "We'll do whatever you choose." Verse 16, so the king went out and all his household with him, but the king left 10 concubines to keep the house. And the king went out and all the people with him, and they stopped at the last house. So they're leaving Jerusalem, and there's the last house before they're away from the town. Now all his servants passed on beside him, all the Cherethites, all the Pelethites, the Gittites, 600 men who had come with him from Gath, passed on before him. So he's stopping outside of town. They're heading out. He's regrouping there outside of the city and probably preparing for the journey. Let's get set here. 600 servants, and they include his mighty men, which we're going to see in chapter 23. Not today, but there's 37 mighty men that are pretty specifically described there, and they're are passing before the king. Verse 19, then the king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why will you also go with us? Return and remain with the king, for you are a foreigner and also an exile. Return to your own place." So here's a guy that's come recently, a foreigner, and David is just telling, why are you coming? You can go. Absalom's got the upper hand. You can go, and you're not going to be killed by him. You'll be fine. You came only yesterday, and shall I today make you wander with us while I go where I will? Return and take back your brothers. Mercy and truth be with you. But Ittai answered the king and said, "As the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, surely wherever my lord the king may be, whether for death or for life, there also your servant will be." So he says, "I'm going to serve you, David." Therefore David said to Ittai, "Go and pass over." So Ittai the Gittite passed over with all his men and all the little ones who were with him. While all the country was weeping with a loud voice, all the people passed over. The king also passed over the brook Kidron, and all the people passed over toward the way of the wilderness. So they're going east across the Kidron to the Mount of Olives, and then east towards Jericho to cross the Jordan. Verse 24, now behold, Zadok had come, and all the Levites with him. Zadok is the high priest at the time. With him, carrying the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God, and Abiathar came up until all the people had finished passing from the city. Abiathar is also a priest. And he is, remember back when Doeg slaughtered all the priests, and one was escaped. That's this guy, Abiathar. This is from 1 Samuel 22. And Zadok is the high priest, and he will anoint King Solomon in the future. So, verse 25. And the king said to Zadok, "Return the ark of God to the city. If I find favor in the sight of the Lord, then he will bring me back again and show me both it and his habitation." So this is David's instruction. And it's, David, throughout these 3 chapters, it's like he has settled down and been humbled. He's not, he feels bad about his sin, and we're going to see his family is suffering for it, and he knows it's on his shoulders, and he just has a different view here. Now, the whole idea of bringing the ark to protect you, we saw that didn't work. And David is saying, no, you bring it back. If God wants me back to the ark, then I'll be there. But I'm going to accept what comes. Bring me back again. Verse 26, but if he should say thus, talking about God, if God should say thus, I have no delight in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me as seems good to him. The king said to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Return to the city in peace, and your 2 sons with you, and your son Ahimaaz, and Jonathan, the son of Abiathar. See, I am going to wait at the fords of the wilderness. So this would probably be the fords on the crossing place of the Jordan. So it's going east towards Jericho and towards where you cross over into the wilderness. I'm going to wait at the fords of the wilderness until word comes from you to inform me. Therefore, Zadok and Abiathar returned the ark of God to Jerusalem and remained there. So David's got a couple, 4, the 2 priests and their 2 sons, as kind of somebody to watch, to be in Jerusalem on David's side. And David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives and wept as he went, and his head was covered, and he walked barefoot. So he's grieving, he's humiliated. Then all the people who were with him each covered his head and went up weeping as they went. Now someone told David, saying, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, I pray, make the counsel of Ahithophel foolishness. Now he knows Ahithophel has been a good counselor. He's known as a good counselor, but David just saying, "Oh, that's not good," and he prays to God that he makes that counsel foolishness. Verse 32: It happened as David was coming to the summit where God was worshipped, that behold, Hushai the Archite met him with his coat torn, and dust on his head. And David said to him, If you pass over with me, then you'll be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant, O king, as I have been your father's servant in time past, so I will now be your servant, then you can thwart the counsel of Ahithophel for me. So now he's asking Hushai, which is another counselor, to you're coming with me, but you'd be better if you could go back. And I've prayed to God that Ahithophel's counsel would go wrong. You go and work on that too. So, and then he tells them, are not Zadok and Abiathar the priests with you there? So he tells them, I've already sent them. They're there. So it shall be that whatever you hear from the king's house, you shall report to Zadok and Abiathar the priests. Behold, their 2 sons are with them there, Ahimaaz, Zadok's son, and Jonathan, Abiathar's son. And by them you shall send me everything that you hear. So Hushai, David's friend, came into the city, and Absalom came into Jerusalem. So he's got some, this is David making plans at a time of war. And so he's got these allies in the city. Let's see.
In this time we call them intelligence.
Yeah, right. He's got his intelligence coming and going. Verse 16, or chapter 16. Now when David had passed a little beyond the summit, behold, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth. Now remember Mephibosheth. He is the son of Jonathan. And remember, he was crippled in his feet. And David wanted to honor Jonathan. So he told Mephibosheth, you can, be with me, you can eat at my table, and we'll take care of you. And then he had a servant, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, who cared for Jonathan's son. So Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him with a couple of saddled donkeys, and on them were 200 loaves of bread and 100 clusters of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a jug of wine. And the king said to Ziba, "Why do you have these?" And Ziba said, "The donkeys are for the king's household to ride, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for whoever is faint in the wilderness to drink." Then the king said, "And where is your master's son?" And he said, "Where is Mephibosheth?" And Ziba said to the king, "Behold, he is staying in Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom to my father, to me. Will restore the kingdom of my father to me.'" So he tells David here that the kingdom is going to come back to Saul's household, which I'm a part of, and it'll be to me.
And he attributes that to Mephibosheth.
That's right. He attributes it to Mephibosheth says that. And so, let's see, "Behold, he is staying at Jerusalem, for he said, 'Today the house of Israel will restore the kingdom to my father, to me.' So the king said to Ziba," this is King David, said to Ziba, "Behold, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is yours." And Ziba said, "I prostrate myself. Let me find favor in your sight, O my lord, the king." Now, if we look over at 2 Samuel chapter 19 and verse 24, this is after David is back at Jerusalem. Then Mephibosheth, the son of Saul, came down to meet the king, and he had neither cared for his feet, nor trimmed his mustache, nor washed his clothes from the day the king departed until the day he came in peace. And it was when he came from Jerusalem to meet the king that the king said to him, "Why did you not go with me, Mephibosheth?" So he answered, "O my lord the king, my servant deceived me. For your servant said, 'I will saddle a donkey for myself, that I may ride on it and go with the king, because your servant is lame. Moreover, he has slandered your servant to my lord the king. But my lord the king is like the angel of God. Therefore do what is good in your sight. For all my father's household was nothing but dead men before my lord the king. Yet you set your servant among those who ate at your own table. What right do I have yet that I should complain any more to the king?" So the king said to him, "Why do you still speak of your affairs? I have decided you and Ziba will divide the land." So, knowing Mephibosheth as a little bit, we don't know a whole lot, but Jonathan's son, we know the character of Jonathan, and Ziba. You tend to think, Ziba was pulling his leg. Ziba made this up just to get on the right side of the king.
He's what we call a rascal.
Yeah. So, and now David ended up saying divide the property between the two. So, but okay, let's go back to chapter 16 and verse 5. When King David came to Bahurim, behold, there came out from there a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. He came out cursing continually as he came. So this is in the area where the tribe of Benjamin would be. It's on the way from Jerusalem to the fords of the Jordan. And here's Shimei cursing and throwing stones. He threw stones at David and at all the servants of King David, and all the people and all the mighty men were at his right hand and his left. And thus Shimei said when he cursed, get out, you man of bloodshed, and you worthless fellow. The Lord has returned upon you all the bloodshed of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. And the Lord has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. And behold, you are taken in your own evil, for you are a man of bloodshed. So here's a guy, here's David and all his mighty men, and this guy is throwing rocks and cursing at him, and he's on it's like a little ravine, and he's walking on a ridge, and he's on this other ridge, and he's throwing it on the David and his servants walking out of town. And these are cutting remarks for David. He said, "Get out, you man of bloodshed, you worthless fellow." He's got to be thinking of what he's been involved with. You know, the blood that's on his hands. Uriah the Hittite. And that now your son will replace you. You are reaping what you sowed. So David's listening to this, and yes, you know, this is cutting, and this is verse 9. And Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, "Why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over now and cut off his head." So Abishai is Abishai, Joab, and Azael are all sons of Zeruiah. Zeruiah is David's sister, or at least half sister. But the king said, "What have I to do with you, O sons of Zeruiah?" That's Abishai, Joab, and Azael. "If he curses, and if the Lord has told him, curse David, then who shall say, 'Why have you done so?'" Then David said to Abishai and to all his servants, "Behold my son who came out from me and seeks my life. How much more now this Benjamite, you know, who's cursing and throwing stones? Let him alone. Let him curse, for the Lord has told him." So he's listening to this, and what he's saying is right. David is distressed, and he feels condemned, self-condemned, and he had that, well, in 2 Samuel 12, you'll remember this when we read this. In 12 and verse 9 through 11, this is from Nathan. "Why have you despised the word of the Lord by doing evil in his sight? You have struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword. You have taken his wife to be your wife, and killed him with the sword of the sons of Ammon. Now, therefore, the sword shall never depart from your house, because you have despised me and have taken the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your wife. Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you from your own household. I will even take your wives before your eyes and give them to your companion, and he shall lie with your wives in broad daylight. Indeed, you did it secretly, but I'll do this thing before all Israel and under the sun." So David remembers the words of Nathan, and so he's having this trouble in his family, and he knows it's himself. He's caused it. Verse 12, "Perhaps the Lord will look on my affliction and return good to me instead of his cursing this day." So David and his men went on the way, and Shimei went along on the hillside parallel with him. And as he went, he cursed and cast stones and threw dust at him. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary, and he refreshed himself there. This word weary, it's an interesting word that they think is the name of a town, and it means a rest for the weary. And they expect that there was a town there that had an inn for caravans that were coming through. And so it's like the name of a motel, rest for the weary. So that's, yeah. Verse 15, "Then Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, entered Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him." So Absalom arrives at Jerusalem, and he's not got a war to go to, and David has taken that away. And I think that was David's plan. He said, I do not want Jerusalem destroyed and all these people to die. I'm going to just walk away from it. So Absalom arrives with Ahithophel. And now it came about when Hushai the Archite, that's who David sent back in, David's friend, came to Absalom, that Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king, long live the king." And Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend?" Your friend David. "Why should you not go with your friend?" Then Hushai said to Absalom, "No, for whom the Lord, his people, and all the men of Israel have chosen, his will I be, and with him I will remain. And besides, whom should I serve? Should I not serve in presence of his son? So I have served in your father's presence, so I will be in your presence." So Absalom at first, he's skeptical, but Hushai makes a pretty good speech. And Hushai is David's man inside, the inside man. Verse 20. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give your advice. What shall we do?" And Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go to your father's concubines," those 10 that David left, "whom he has left to keep the house. Then all Israel will hear that you have made yourself odious to your father. The hands of all who are with you will also be strengthened." So this is just a terrible, disgusting suggestion. You go into them in a tent in front of Israel. You do it out in the open to make yourself odious to your father.
It's the foolishness that David prayed for.
That David what?
That David prayed for.
Oh. Yeah, well, I didn't think of that, but yeah, that could be. Yeah.
David prayed for Ahithophel's counsel to be foolishness.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof, and Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. And the advice of Ahithophel, which he gave in those days, was as if one inquired of the word of God. So was all the advice of Ahithophel regarded by both David and Absalom. So Ahithophel was a well-respected man, but he makes this just terrible, disgusting suggestion, and I'm sure part of it too was he never wanted David and Absalom to reconcile. I mean, they're father and son. But this is a way that just puts a wedge in that's what I imagine that's part of his reasoning.
It seems to me it also emphasizes that irrespective of who is involved in this lowly planet we live on, God's in control.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
God's will is going to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. You see it going every direction, but through it there's a will of God that is being accomplished. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Chapter 17, Hushai's counsel. This is what he's going to tell David. Furthermore, Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Please let me choose 12,000 men that I may arise and pursue David tonight." So remember, Absalom is in the capital. He's got a lot of Israel. In fact, in 1513, a lot of Israel was following, had jumped on the Absalom bandwagon, and was supporting him. And let's see. So Ahithophel says, "Let me take 12,000 men and go and pursue David tonight, and I will come upon him while he is weary and exhausted, and will terrify him so that all the people who are with him will flee. Then I'll strike down the king alone, and I'll bring back all the people to you. The return of everyone depends on the man you seek." It's all based on David. Get rid of David, and I can do that with 12,000. So the plan pleased Absalom and all the elders of Israel. But Absalom wants to ask Hushai too. Then Absalom said, now call Hushai the Archite also, and let us hear what he has to say. And why did he ask Hushai too? Because they all thought it was good advice. But I don't know, it may be that Absalom understands he's talking about his dad. I'm sending out someone to destroy my dad. And it's a guess. Maybe there is some hesitation about killing his father, or maybe it's just he wants to hear the two counselors. Verse 6, when Hushai had come to Absalom, Absalom said to him, "Ahithophel has spoken thus. Shall we carry out his plan? If not, you speak." So Hushai said to Absalom, This time the advice that Ahithophel has given is not good. Moreover, Hushai said, you know your father and his men, that they are mighty men, and they are fierce, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. And your father is an expert in warring, will not spend the night with the people. Behold, he has now hidden himself in one of the caves or in another place, and it will be when he falls on them at the first attack that whoever hears it will say, there's been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. And even the one who is valiant, whose heart is like the heart of a lion, will completely lose heart. For all Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and those who are with him are valiant men. But I counsel that all Israel be surely gathered to you from Dan to Beersheba, as the sand that is by the sea in abundance, and that you personally go into battle. So we shall come to him in one of the places where he can be found, and we will fall on him as the dew falls on the ground. And of him and of all the men who are with him, not even one will be left. And so, you know, he's giving a good argument. You know your dad. He's a mighty man. He's got these mighty warriors with him. He's fierce. He's an expert at war. And if you go and the first result is a bunch of Absalom's men are killed, it's gonna your heart is gonna be, it's gonna kill you. You know, it's gonna the valiant men will lose heart. You don't want that to happen. You want all of Israel with you there. So verse 13, and if he withdraws into a city, then all Israel shall bring ropes to that city, and we will drag it into the valley until not even a small stone is found there. Then Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel. For the Lord has ordained to thwart the good counsel of Ahithophel in order that the Lord might bring calamity on Absalom. So Hushai then, you know, is really, I mean, he's put Absalom kind of in the hero's role. You go with the whole, all of Israel. You be there. Ahithophel is kind of thinking of himself in his plan. I'll give me 12,000, I'll do it, and I'm going to be the hero. Verse 15. Then Hushai said to Zadok and to Abiathar the priest, this is what Ahithophel has counseled. So Hushai has told the priests, now the priests are in Jerusalem, that's Zadok and Abiathar. This is what Ahithophel counseled, Absalom and the elders of Israel, and this is what I have counseled. Now therefore send quickly and tell David, saying, do not spend the night in the fords of the wilderness, but by all means cross over, lest the king and all the peoples who are with him be destroyed. So he's telling them as if Ahithophel's plan might still take place. He said, this is what they talked about. You understand. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz were staying at Enrogel. Enrogel is actually what's called the Fuller's Spring. So it's just south of Jerusalem. And that would be the laundromat. So that's where people would go to use the water to do their laundry. And so I think it's like within a half a mile of Jerusalem. It's just right outside of the city, south of Jerusalem. And so they were staying there, and a maidservant would go and tell them, and they would go and tell King David. So they had this plan that when someone would take the laundry to the Fuller's Spring, doesn't say anything about laundry in the Bible. I'm just saying that it's a Fuller's Spring, so it might have been laundry. And when she would go there, she would tell them, and then they would be able to go over to and tell David. And remember, these two guys there are the sons of the priests. Go and tell them, and they would not, and they would go and tell King David, for they could not be seen entering the city. But a lad did see them and told Absalom. So the two of them departed quickly and came to the house of a man in Bahurim who had a well in this courtyard, and they went down into it. So they're pretty close, not too far down the road towards the fords of the Jordan. they hide in this well, and the woman took a covering and spread it over the well's mouth and scattered grain on it so that nothing was known. So probably, they would put grain on a covering and then rub it or do whatever they had to do to get the husks off of it, to clean it and prepare it. So she's out there, and doesn't look like there's a well there, I guess. And so that nothing was known. Verse 20, then Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house and said, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? And the woman said to them, they have crossed the brook of water. And when they searched and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. And it came about after they had departed that they came out of the well and went and told King David. And they said to David, arise, cross the water quickly, for Ahithophel has counseled against you. Then David and all the peoples who were with him arose, crossed the Jordan, and by dawn not even one remained who was not crossed the Jordan. So that message gets delivered. They quickly cross the Jordan. And when Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and rose and went to his home, to his city, and set his house in order and strangled himself. Thus he died and was buried in the grave of his father. So here's a wicked man that hung himself, which reminds us of someone else. Verse 24, then David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan, and he and all the men of Israel with him. And Absalom set Amasa over the army in place of Joab. Now Amasa was the son of a man whose name was Ithra the Israelite, who went into Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. We're not going to get into all the connections there. But Absalom sent Amasa in the place of Joab, because Joab is with David. Verse 26, and Israel and Absalom camped in the land of Gilead. So Gilead is just across the Jordan from Jericho to the east on the east side of Jordan. And when David had come to Mahanaim, Jeshobi, the son of Nahash, from Reba of the sons of Ammon, Machir, the son of Amiel, and Lodabar, and my favorite guy in the Bible. I just love his name, Barzillai the Gileadite. He's from Rogelim, and we're going to look at just a little closer at him because he was a neat guy. These others and him brought beds, basins, pottery, wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, lentils, parched seeds, honey, curd, sheep, and cheese of the herd for David and for the people who were with him to eat. And they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness. And so in 2 Samuel 19, we've got, it tells us a little bit more, verse 31. Now Barzillai the Gileadite had come down from Rogelim, and he went to the Jordan with the king to escort him over the Jordan. The Barzillai was very old, being 80 years old, and he had sustained the king while he stayed at Mahanaim. That's right, that's what we just read about. For he was a very great man. And the king said to Barzillai, sustain you in Jerusalem with me. But Barzillai said to the king, how long have I yet to live that I should go up with the king to Jerusalem? I'm now 80 years old. Can I distinguish between good and bad? Or can your servant taste what I eat and what I drink? Or can I hear any more the voice of singing men and women? Why then should your servant be an added burden to my lord? Your servant would merely cross over the Jordan with the king. Why should the king compensate me with this reward? Please let your servant return that I may die in my own city near the grave of my father and my mother. However, here is your servant Chimham. Let him cross over with my lord and king, and do for him what is good in your sight. And so David agrees, and the king kissed Barzillai and blessed him and returned him. In 1 Kings 2:7, we've got another reference to him. But show kindness. So this is David when he's giving charge to Solomon. And he says, show kindness to the sons of Barzillai the Gileadite, and let them be among those who eat at your table. For they assisted me when I fled from Absalom, your brother. And so David feels this was a big deal to David. And what he did and what this man did, an 80-year-old man, Steve, next year you're going to be 80, right? Yeah, 2 years, you're going to be 80. Think about what this guy, I mean, what did he do? I made a poem so you can remember. Barzillai the Gileadite satisfied David's appetite. That's what he did, but it was a big, big thing to David to see, and he remembered it. And you read a little bit more about him in the book of Ezra, but we really don't have time to go there right now.
Walking from the Jordan up to Jerusalem was not a really exciting opportunity for him.
No. And so now in just 18:1 through 5, you've got David numbered the people who were with him and set them over commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds. So he's organizing his forces. He has 3 companies, Joab, Abishai, and Ittai the Gittite. Now Ittai is he's probably not over the Israelites. They had a lot of other countries that were helping. The Ammonites were there. And so probably they put Joab and Abishai over the Israelites in 2 of the companies, and the 3rd they gave to Ittai the Gittite. And he's one of David's mighty men. David said, I'll go with you. But they tell him, no, you stay. Okay, so he says, okay. And then the last thing he says is, be gentle with Absalom. Here's a guy that's trying to kill him. It's his son, but he's trying to kill him. And he's suffered the grief of another child, and he's just seeing this. But it tells us here that all the commanders and everybody in the army heard his words. He made sure he stood there and told everyone as they left, be gentle with Absalom. So we'll wrap it up there and pick it up next week.